All right, so welcome everyone to the March 2022 edition of our Collaboration Cafe webinar series. This is sponsored by the Midwest Big Data Innovation Hub with support from NSF. I'm John MacMullen, I'm the Executive Director of the Hub, and I'm very happy today to be joined by Dr. Alan Sussman from NSF, who's here to help us understand the NSF Career Program that we're talking about today. Dr. Sussman is a program director in the Office of Advanced Cyberinfrastructure at NSF, which is in the CISE Directorate. A lot of the folks in our community are very familiar with CISE and the programs there. But today our focus is on early career support for new faculty, new scholars. Dr. Sussman has a responsibility for a range of cyber infrastructure programs, and I'm sure would be happy to talk with you about other programs as well. We also have some prior awardees of the career program on the call today to tell us about their experiences. Thank you for being here as well. And I'll just mention that the slides that we have during the session today will be available after the call along with the recording. And we do have all prior sessions of this series on our YouTube channel for you to check out at your leisure. All right, so for those who are new to the Hub or joining the call for the first time today, and especially for those who are watching the recording later, I'm just going to do a quick overview of who we are and what we do on this call. So the Midwest Big Data Innovation Hub is part of a national network of 4 data innovation hubs that are funded by NSF, and that program was established back in 2015. So we have been around for quite a while at this point. And we're very focused on building communities and collaborations around data science, research data, other data related activities, both in our regions and across the country. So we collaborate as a network of hubs, but we also have regional programmatic activities and work that we do. In the Midwest, we have several priority areas that are based on regional strengths and community interests. Those range from materials and manufacturing through agriculture and water quality, other topics. So very much focused on community interests and research directions here. We are led out of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign through the National Center for Supercomputing Applications. But we have, as you can see here, several partners across the region who are co-leads for this project and a much larger collaboration community working in these areas. Tell you a little about this webinar series. We had a lot of community input over the past couple of years about the need for a venue to bring together people from multiple disciplines and from across institutions and sectors to think about how to respond to large-scale proposal opportunities from federal agencies, from other funding sources, and really provide a neutral environment for people to come together and have those discussions. And so we established this series last fall, and it has been pretty well received by the community, and we're always interested in your input as we go along here on other topics, other solicitations we can talk about, and we have a number of different activities that we like to engage in on this call. We're very focused on the early career opportunity today, but that is a theme across this series. And so we want to talk about this specific opportunity today, but also encourage early career folks to come back for future sessions and participate in the discussions around large-scale collaboration. We are interested in featuring lightning talks from early career scholars as well, and you can use the form on our webpage to nominate yourself for a future talk in this series. So beyond the webinar series, we do have a variety of resources that we're working on developing to support ongoing conversations and collaborations. So beyond our website page for the series, we do have a Slack community. We have a shared Google Drive with a number of different documents and resources for you, including prior awardees in the Midwest for all of the programs that we talk about, to give you a sense of what other projects have been funded. And of course, we have a YouTube playlist of all of our recordings, as I mentioned. Wanted to mention that we also are very happy to engage with you on proposals going forward. That includes the career program that we'll talk about today. We have helped prior awardees amplify their research activities through our communications channels, and we're happy to talk with you about opportunities to do that with your work as well. But we're also open to other kinds of collaborations that may involve partnering and funding opportunities as we continue to evolve the network that we're building here. So happy to have those conversations offline with anyone who would like to. All right, so let's move into our topic for today. We'll be focused on the NSF Career Program, which is really a flagship funding opportunity from the foundation to support scholars who are early in their careers, to help them develop the kinds of infrastructure and research output that helps them be successful over time. We'll go through some of the basics of the program here on the call today, but I really like to spend the majority of the time having a discussion, getting questions from those of you who have joined the live session here, and having some input from Alan Sussman as well about the impact that NSF sees from this program. So we won't go through all the details here. I encourage you to check out the solicitation in detail if you haven't, and we'll talk in a moment about why that's very important. But what we normally do on these calls is break down some of the basics of the solicitations that we're looking at, talk about the size and scope, and some of the basics of eligibility and participation. So in this particular case, we're talking about a relatively small budget in terms of other kinds of projects that NSF funds, but this is a large number of awards that the foundation makes each year in this program. And so it's definitely has a large impact in a number of ways to the community at large. Some of the suggestions that are made in the solicitation are to look at prior awards in your particular discipline or area of research to understand what has been funded previously, in part to understand the size of the budget that you may want to request, but really also to get a sense of what work has been done in your area, so that you're not duplicating that. Some of this work may be new enough that it hasn't been published yet in that area. So this can give you some insights about what is coming out from other researchers and peers that you have. NSF does encourage potential proposers to this program to talk with a program officer in the area of your interest and your research, to give you some feedback on your ideas and give you some more guidance about the concept that you're proposing. And that can be a little intimidating, I think, for new faculty, but that really is core to the work that they do at the foundation, and in helping to give guidance to proposers in all the programs. So definitely encourage you to explore who is the program officer in your particular area, and definitely reach out to them to have that conversation. So there is no formal letter of intent or pre-proposal for this program, but having that conversation is really important. There is a limit of one proposal per PI for each of the annual cycles. So you can't submit, 3 or 4 each year. There's a limit there. And there is a lifetime maximum of 3 proposals. So you get three chances to get funded, and that's it. So if you don't make it in the first time, you have another couple of chances. But if you get funded in your second try, that's your limit as well. So you can't get funded multiple times through this program. All right, who else, what are some of the eligibility restrictions here? This is focused on early career, as we've said, and at eligible organizations. So we'll talk in a minute about what those 2 distinctions are that are made here in the solicitation. But NSF is encouraging people from underrepresented groups, under-resourced institutions, people who historically have not been well represented in STEM fields to engage here. So we definitely encourage all to participate here. All right, so what is early career in the context of this proposal? So if you look at the solicitation, there are some very specific criteria for who is able to propose to this program. You have to have a doctorate, you have to be in a field of study that NSF supports, and have some other appointment-related characteristics here. So definitely you want to check that out before you spend a lot of time developing a proposal to make sure that you are eligible for that. And then in terms of where you are located, colleges, universities, down from 4-year universities through the 2-year and community college level are definitely eligible, but it goes beyond that into museums and labs and other organizations. And so definitely a very wide net that they are casting here. And that's great to see that it's open to folks beyond the sort of typical academic tenure track environment. All right, a couple of other quick things to be mindful of as you're looking at this solicitation. There are some specific requirements that are different from other programs. So for example, as an early career faculty member, there's some interest from NSF's part that your institution is supporting you and helping you develop as a faculty member. And so there's a letter of support from your home department that's required that has some specific elements to that talks about the institutional commitment. So there's that element. If you have collaborators that you're thinking about involving in this work, whether that's to get access to a research site or to use some equipment for your activities, having some letters from those folks would be a strength to your proposal as well. This really is intended for individual researchers, and so co-PIs are not allowed on this, but there are some opportunities to support postdocs, students, other kinds of personnel who may be helping you carry out the work that you're proposing. So I did want to note that they have a pretty nice timeline and milestone document. This is a PDF that is linked from the solicitation that really helps you get a sense of what the timing is for some of these important steps. And so I'm not sure, Alan, if that will be updated for 2022. The version that is in there now is for the last cycle, but I think probably the number of days in terms of the duration there is probably similar regardless.
Yeah, that should get updated. It's just we're still a little far out since the deadline's not until late July. So
that's right.
That should get updated in plenty of time before the,
So I mentioned that we have a list of prior awards to this program on our website. We'll go ahead and put that link in the chat for you. So that's a great way to take a look at what other folks have proposed. You're seeing, a biased sample there. Those are the people who got funded. And so we don't know who didn't get funded, what kinds of things they proposed. But we at least have some examples of what the foundation has been excited about supporting. All right, couple of other points here before we move into discussion. As we've talked about previously on this call, if you have participated, NSF and other federal agencies have been really great about providing guidance to proposers about what a successful proposal looks like and what specific elements they want to see in your documentation. So that's very helpful. That means that you really need to read that solicitation very thoroughly and get a sense of what specifically they would like to see there. I've pulled out a couple of elements here that to me look pretty important, but when we get into the discussion with Alan and other awardees, I want to drill down on that a little bit more. For example, there is quite a bit of detail on the scope of activities and specific elements around how you might focus this project that you're proposing. And so that looks like very helpful guidance, and taking a look at that, making sure that you're in alignment with what the program goals are at the high level, but also the lower level is really important. They also give you very good guidance about how the reviewers who are looking at your proposal are going to be evaluating that. So specific criteria that they will use in that review process to compare your proposal against the goals that they have. So very helpful to spend some time really drilling down into that text. All right, so this is just a very brief overview of the program to get us some context here. I wanted to make folks aware of some upcoming activities. As Alan said, we're very early in the cycle here. We like to get folks thinking about these programs pretty early on so that you can prepare in advance. So coming up, there are a couple of sort of workshop style events. SIZE has a workshop in early April that I believe is hosted by UNC Chapel Hill, which is an online event to talk more about the process and what it looks like. There's some office hours for one of the other units at NSF to talk about this program, and a proposal writing workshop in May as well. So Alan, I don't know if you have the date for the webinar yet. It looks like it's probably in June most years, but folks can look out for that.
To be honest, I don't think the date's been set. There's a group of program directors that sort of run this, and it typically gets set, a month, or it'll be announced on online, and then it goes out to mailing lists, and we just so that's done yearly, at least a month before the deadline.
Yeah, so look for that in the sort of June timeframe. That'll give you another opportunity to hear from the program leaders and to ask questions through that mechanism. So I guess, Alan, I'll turn it over to you here to talk about any OAC or size specific dimensions that you wanted to mention. I also wanted to ask about the PECASE element here. So this is a sort of supplementary dimension to this program. It wasn't clear to me whether that pool of people is selected from the current round of proposals or whether that's based on prior awards. But if you have any input on that, that would be helpful as well.
Sure. Well, let me start with that because before I forget. So PCASE is actually it actually originates from the White House, and it goes out to I don't know how many agencies, to be honest, but a bunch of different agencies, with NSF being one of the main ones. And we nominate. There's some number of nominees each round from prior awardees. So it's not a separate competition. It's basically a selection of prior awardees that then, are sort of get special recognition from the White House. And I know there are other agencies, including like DOE and NIH, Department of Energy, National Institutes of Health, several other agencies that also nominate awardees. And it happens periodically. Over the last, there hasn't been one in a while. I know there are actually multiple rounds in the pipeline. There was a backlog from the previous administration. And so those get announced separately, but it's not a separate competition.
Right. Yeah, there's no additional funding, and there's no supplementary reward there. Yeah.
No, all the glory, none of the funding, no additional funding. And that's another thing I want. So I think it's pretty typical, at least in our directorate and in the size directorate, that the awards are larger than the minimum. I know that our awards, again, so you can also look at prior awards. There's an NSF award search webpage, and you can sort of pick a program, you can pick time period, all that. But again, you can only view award information, and there's an abstract and a title and an amount of all the public information. Nothing about there's no published information about declined proposals, about proposals that didn't get awarded, because those are not owned by NSF, they're owned by the PIs. So the recommendation is go talk to people at your institution or other colleagues about to get examples of successful and unsuccessful proposals, potentially with the feedback from the reviewers. Again, that's not something that NSF distributes, but PIs, proposers are free to share their materials with whoever they want. I can talk more about the program, but I'd rather take questions. But what I do want to do is talk about my office and sort of the kinds of research, just a couple of minutes about the kinds of research that we support, so people know what sort of OAC is interested in. OAC stands for the Office of Advanced Cyber Infrastructure, which is one of 4 parts to SISE, Computer Information Science and Engineering. For historical reasons, we're an office, the other ones are divisions. No real difference other than that. So let me share. I have one slide. Am I going to be able? I think you said I'll be able to share. I have one slide. Let me see if I can find it. Yep, that's it. And I'll make it bigger. So this is taken from the actually the program page for our core research. We're part of, we participate in the SISE core research program, and there's a program page for each program, and we only have one program within our division, within our office. So this describes the kind of research that OAC supports, which means this is the kind of research, if you're doing this kind of research, you would want to send your career proposal to OAC. So this just defines what we mean by advanced cyber infrastructure, which is broadly construed computational data, software, networking, and security, resources, tools, services, computational data, skills, and expertise that can transform science and engineering research. And OAC is a little different from the other divisions within SISE and the other directors within SISE in that we deal a lot more with, I would say, more applied translational research. So we're looking at design, development, utilization of robust research cyber infrastructure and the research on cyber. So we talk about research on cyber infrastructure and cyber infrastructure for research. So that includes things like translational research, spanning design to practice. It can be multidisciplinary, extreme scale, looking at scaling to very large systems, driven by science and engineering research, deployable as robust research CI. We fund projects in systems architecture, middleware for high-end systems, extreme scale systems that can include design, benchmarking, storage, networks, IO, very broadly construed, scalable algorithms and applications that includes numerical and high-performance scientific computing, data, software, visualization, modeling, simulation, and then sort of the last part is this sort of ecosystem, advanced cyber infrastructure ecosystem, things like programming languages, libraries, environments, tools. And often it's multidisciplinary in terms of having another area of science or engineering being sort of a secondary focus besides the cyber infrastructure, whether that's physics, astronomy, chemistry, materials, whatever, that is not unusual for us at all. So I can stop sharing now, so that I hope that was somewhat informative. And yeah, I'm happy to answer questions about, and I've been doing the career program for OAC now for 3 years, so I have a little experience at this.
That's great. Thanks very much for that. I'll just throw up some discussion points here to get us started. We can certainly broaden that out as well, but I want to welcome into the discussion a couple of prior awardees who were gracious enough to join the call today to talk about their experiences. We have Elaina Sutley from the University of Kansas. Thank you for being here. And Matthew Daly from University of Illinois, Chicago. So welcome to you both. Wanted to ask you just some basics about your experience. There's some prompts here that you're welcome to respond to, but feel free to go off in other directions as well. But you both got funded, so congratulations on that. How has that worked out for you? What would you tell people who are interested in proposing to this program?
Thanks for inviting me to be here and speak about it. I think it's been fantastic funding to have, right? I got awarded my first attempt, so I don't know that there's much I would do differently since it worked out so well. But you know, some things I really appreciated the comments that you made about talking to your program officer, because as I've had conversations before I submitted, since I've submitted and been awarded, I've really learned how different programs see different things about the career proposal. So I really encourage that. So I submitted to HDBE, Human Disasters in the Built Environment. And so there's some specific elements to HDBE that were really important. What was also really common, at least at that time, I was awarded in 2019, were two things that were really critical that I learned through talking to past awardees from the program, as well as the program officer at the time. And that was just how significant of a role the educational component needed to be. So I've had colleagues who talked about in theirs, it was very small, but in my 15 pages, you know, 6 pages were on the educational part. Half of my references were on the educational part. So it was a really big component, and that was, you know, basically expected or somewhat normal for that program. And that's not necessarily what I've heard coming out of other programs. So I think that's really important to get a good handle on. And then the other big thing that I think was just super critical, again, for my program, was they want to see, this is elevating your career. It's launching you in your career. So it's all the things that faculty are expected to do. And that's why the educational component is important, like the research component, but they want to see how they're integrated. And so what my program officer told me was, you know, it's really easy. Everyone does, it's not easy, but everyone does a great job of showing how their research feeds into their educational program. But the winners show how their educational program feeds back into their research. So when there's really that link going both directions, that's when you get a winning proposal. And so that took a lot of thought on how to do. And anyway, so I just think that was some of the best advice that I got, because I'm not sure I would have done it otherwise.
Great, thanks very much for that. Matthew, you're in a sort of different area in material science, I think, right? And so what sort of differences did you see in your experience?
Well, actually, it's kind of funny because my experiences were very similar, actually. So hi, everyone. Matthew Daly from UIC here. So my award is housed in the DMR, so the Division of Materials Research, in the Metals and Metallic Nanostructures program. So that's really tunneling down to it. And I also was lucky enough to get it in my first attempt, so I don't know if I have a lot of that revisionist perspective to think about too much about what I could have done better. Also, for reference, I applied in my third year, so I don't know how that tracks with the people that are here. And yeah, I would say a lot of the same common elements actually, as was just stated, that the unique thing about the career is that real focus on how education and research work together to advance you as a professional, right, as a scientist. So yeah, I don't think I really have too much to add there because it was very well said. A couple other things that worked for me, or I thought were good ideas that it was recommended to me to include in the project description, was kind of a roadmap for what your long-term career would look like after the award, because that's kind of the philosophy of the program, is that they're trying to develop you as the next generation of researchers, right? So having a long-term vision as to what you would do and how what you're doing will start you off on kind of a lifetime of achievement in your area. It seemed to be important from what the advice I was getting, and I thought that made a lot of sense. The other big tip I got was, and I think this kind of is very general, but I think it's good advice, is make sure you're writing about things that you're passionate about. And I know that sounds kind of broad and maybe not so specific, but it is really true, because you do really need to make a compelling case of both research and education. And if you are throwing something in that's perfunctory, or you think it's necessary and you're not really passionate about it, the panel will probably sniff that out. So I think that was really good advice that I received. Another thing that I was a little bit hesitant to do for some reasons, but I went ahead, and it was really good advice, was I shared my career proposal with colleagues at my institution, and it was a bit strategic. Obviously, you have to be careful about not sharing it with people that could be potentially competitors in the process, but people that I knew that were previous award winners, either in my discipline or not in my discipline, people that were a little bit further away from my discipline, just to see if it had a little bit more broad appeal and they could really understand what the innovation was that I was trying to put forward. That was very, very, very important. I don't think I would have been successful if I hadn't gotten their feedback and incorporated it into my submission. So I don't think I covered any of the questions that you asked. What would you do differently, or what would you do the same? Some of those things I would do the same, but that's my 5-minute take on it so far.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you both for that input. Let's open it up to questions from folks on the call here. I see several new faces on the call. Happy to have your questions as we go along here. Feel free to put those in the chat as well if you would like.
So if nobody's going to ask questions, I'd like to just follow up a little on what we heard from the two prior awardees, from Elaina and Matthew. So those are they pointed out two very important elements, which is that integrated research and education plan, which education also means outreach. It's not just curriculum and directly getting into sort of the teaching part. It's not just teaching. So that integration is sort of the part that's different, I think, right? They shouldn't be two separate activities. They should actually sort of feed back into one another, the way Elaina said. So that's one thing and career is sort of unique that way. The other one is, in terms of long-term research plan, the career is also unusual in that it's a 5-year proposal, right? And that's a long time, especially early in your career, right? And so striking a balance between sort of your short-term research goals and longer-term research goals is an interesting exercise, and kind of difficult, right? And it's sort of expected. The reviewers are going to understand that things that you're going to propose for 4 years out are not going to be as well defined as for the first 2 years. But having a plan, or at least the idea, what that plan, having a plan is important. The fact that that plan may not be what you execute, that's the way research works, that's not the issue. It's thinking hard enough about what your long-term plans are. That's really important, and having that come through in the proposal. And then there's the sort of this balance between promising too much and not enough. And So there's also, right, and this is when I talk with early career faculty all the time about this kind of stuff, it's hard to find that balance, because reviewers will say either there's no way they're going to do all that in 5 years, and then what are you going to do, right? So thinking about something that's feasible within the funding that you're asking for, which is typically on the order of, a month per year of your time, and a graduate student, maybe a little more than that, but it's not that much. We're talking about on the order of 100K a year for 5 years. So feasible, but of course it has to be ambitious enough to be interesting, and all for 5 years. So that's a tough balance, and we know that, everybody knows that, but that's what you're looking for.
Very good. So I see a couple of folks in the chat here. Eli, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for organizing this and for giving your input on previous career awards. I have a couple of questions, but let me start with the first one, because that will define if I should go for the rest. It's probably for the NSF peeps. So I am going up for, or at least I'm planning to be up for promotion this summer for associate. I came up kind of early. I know the deadline is July. How does that work? How does it work timeline wise? Am I out of discussion, or?
That's a very easy question, actually. It's as of the deadline date. As long as you're eligible as of the deadline date, so you haven't been promoted to associate professor by whatever, July 27th or whatever the date is, you're eligible.
All right. So the question, I guess, the word comes out in May, but the ceremony or whatever you call it, it's effective in September. I'm sorry, it's so silly, but I have to ask those
questions. When you get promoted. It's when you get promoted, when that promotion officially takes place. That's the date that matters, because in the end, it's your department that has to certify, your department who certifies that you're eligible, and it's based on when you actually get promoted.
Excellent.
And of course, NSF we don't know that. Right?
Sure.
Your institution is the only one who knows that, right?
The reason I'm asking is when my head of department wants to write that letter, they should, will they mention, like, for example, person X, Eli, got selected for promotion, but it's not effective till September? Like, do they mention something like that in the?
Actually, all they have to certify is that you're eligible. Again, but the it's as of the date, the deadline date. Right, that's the date that matters. It's not a question of when even when you send in the proposal. It's a question of the deadline date. So
excellent. Then I can proceed with the second question. So I am at an institution where I only have undergraduate. I don't have graduate students, and I have a government affiliation, so I am not allowed to supplement my salary. So what does that put me budget wise? Can I budget for a postdoc or is that frowned upon? Like if all my budget is for postdoc and travel, for example?
I think what you need to do is explain that in the budget justification, that you can't take you can't pay for your own salary because of the position that you're in, because of,
yes.
So again, it doesn't make you ineligible. I think it's just something that would have to be described in the budget justification about, because that would look odd not to have any funding for you.
I know, but being a federal employee, you know how you're not allowed by law to supplement your.
Well, I'm not a federal employee, actually. I'm a rotator, so I'm actually a university employee. I'm a professor also. So.
Yeah. Anyway, and one third question, and I promise that's the last. So, what happens if you get the career, and maybe that's something for the career awardees too, and then let's say 2 years down the road, you decide to move to another institution? Is this or does career hold you for 5 years at the same institution?
People move all the time. You just, the awards, as long as your institution will allow it, it can move with you.
All right, perfect, excellent. And the last thing is, I think I heard you saying that, but just to make sure I understand it, I do need to contact NSF program directors about my potential topic before I start writing. Is that correct? Or is that recommended?
Recommended, not required.
Gotcha.
It's mostly so that you end up submitting to the right place, right? We can't, NSF program officers cannot talk about the merits of your idea, your proposal, right? That's for the review panel, and then we get to weigh in afterwards as part of our recommendations. But really, it's a good idea so that you know that you're submitting to the right place.
All right.
And understand what, but it's not required. No.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. That was great. Thank you so much. I look forward to get down to business and start writing that down. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for the questions. I see a question from Jake in the chat here that's similar in some ways about what point of your career does it make sense to do this? And it sounds like, Matthew, you waited a little bit. Elaina, did you do this sort of in your early stage, or when did you propose?
I also submitted for the first time in my third year so that I could, yes, stack it towards the soon end of my tenure track. And I think that was a good approach for me. I didn't have a good idea in my first year, right? And so I would say, if I thought I had a really good idea in my first year, I would have probably gone for it, right? But I didn't, and so the third year ended up making the most sense for me. I meant to say something else earlier that is kind of relevant here too. My research topic was really cross-disciplinary. I'm housed in a structural engineering kind of subgroup or a civil engineering department with structural engineering focus, but I was proposing to do structural engineering, systems engineering, urban planning, sociology. I was pulling all kinds of disciplines together and those concepts and theories in my career proposal. And I was trained, and my dissertation was cross-disciplinary with sociology and engineering. So I had some, background to show for that, but I knew that it was going to be a hard stretch at my place in my career to convince reviewers that I was competent in all of these fields. And I was definitely early in my learning. And so I put together an external advisory board. And I don't think that that's super common for career proposals, or it hasn't been since I've talked to people after getting my award that it's not really common. But I think it made a big difference because I did not have much for preliminary analysis. I actually didn't have any preliminary analysis. I could just show how this built on my trajectory, but I didn't have preliminary analysis, and I was trying to span all these fields. And so I put together, I think, a really strategic external board who, were all people I knew who were committed to helping me succeed within bounds of what they could do. And all the reviewers commented on it, and the panel summary commented on it. And they made notes about not having preliminary analysis to show forth, and then made notes about how they knew that this external advisory board, the members on it, were going to hold me accountable for things, because it was people, that were very well known. So I do think that helped me a lot in that case too. So I think if I were applying in my first year, that might be something to consider too, especially if you don't have preliminary analysis because it's your first year, or if you're really trying to do some stretches in your proposed work, which doing a stretch is a great thing to be doing. That's your career proposal.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, my experience is very similar. I waited until my third year just because I was trying, but in my first year, I started an entirely new area. I tackled a new area I hadn't been before. I waited for a couple papers to kind of come out so I could build a credible case for a career proposal. That's obviously different from those papers and something new, but the skills are somehow transferable, that I have some credibility in that area. And that actually came out in my panel comments as well. They said, this seems risky, but he's done something that seems credible. So it's really about, the question really is not when you should do it, it's when can you make a credible case for the idea you have, I think. So that's always the best time to strike, I think.
But definitely be strategic, because you do only, remember, you get, we see 2 people who got it the first time, but I know there are plenty of cases of people getting it the second or third try. So you want to keep in mind, you only get 3 tries, and it has to be while you're an assistant professor before you get promoted. That's all. Just keep that in mind. Not everybody is successful the first time, but I do know people who've been successful, like I said, the second time, the third time. So it happens. People do get better at writing proposals.
Thank you both very much.
Thanks, Jake, for the question. I see Ramez has your hand up as well. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks all for doing this. Very helpful. And just a quick question, wondering, in terms of preliminary data, everybody always mentions that's very important. How much preliminary data did you have when you went for this? And I guess, is there a such thing as too much? Like, for example, they might say, oh, well, so much of the research is done already. It looks like this person's been working on this project already for a year without funding. Why does he now need funding to do it? So I guess that's my question.
I can go first again. I mean, I kind of spoke to the fact I didn't have preliminary data in mind, but what I did was the last page, my last page was kind of what Matthew was talking about earlier too, of that projection. And my projection, I started it with my dissertation research, and I showed where the career proposal was with that and where I wanted to go after. And I spent a whole page writing about that trajectory. And so, about that credible case, about what I was building off of and what my goals were. And I talked about my career goals first sentence, but of the proposal, but that last page, that's where I really tried to make that credible case, since I didn't have any preliminary data in mind.
Yeah, in my case, my take on your question is yes. If you're doing something that is not substantially different from something that's already been published and put out there, that could be something that comes back to haunt you in the panel review. In my case, I do both experiments and some computation. So the preliminary data I showed was kind of the computational work that showed the experimental work was feasible, and that the focus of the grant was the experimental side. So it was convincing, but also convincing enough that it said, well, this hasn't been done and this is important enough that we should fund this, right?
Yeah, that gets to sort of the innovation, right? I mean, if you're going to propose something, you have to show what's new. And if you've already, it depends what you've done, you can base stuff on, but you have to decide what's new about what you're going to be exploring, right? That's the key. In any proposal, it's not just a career, right? So you have to make it clear what's going to be new. And so there's no, this is the right amount of preliminary work. It's really, sure, you want to have some evidence that there's a chance what you're talking about is going to work, right? There's going to be something interesting coming out of it. But if you've already done a lot, that's a harder case because you've already done a lot. So.
Great, thank you.
Just to follow up on that, you may also want to read and really if you've got a specific program in mind, and the program manager may give you an indication of this depending on your interaction with them, but really take a look at the previous things that have been funded in your program that you're targeting, because it may not even just be, it might be new for you, but you may be unaware that they funded a lot in a specific area, and there may not be a lot of appetite to actually go further. So in my field, for example, batteries have been funded a lot. And every time I talk to an NSF program manager, they just said, it's gotta be amazing because we've put a lot of money in this, and the technology has developed quite a lot since then, right? So it's not even just new to you, it needs to really fit in my take anyways, in the program, the activities of the program.
Very helpful. I'm curious whether Matthew or Elaina, have you been on review panels since you've been an awardee?
My answer is easy, no, and it's because my award hasn't actually started yet. So,
got it.
So I should have said that already. My advice is I'm in that, I know I have it, but it will start in August. So next year I might have completely different advice for people.
So you submitted, the proposal went in this past July, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's 2020, I guess.
The current cycle, it'll be FY22.
Right,
current
2022. Yeah.
Congratulations, Matthew.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have not sat on a career review panel. I've been asked to sit on many a panel since being awarded, and I've sat on a handful of them, but not a career one yet.
That's not unusual. I think for most career panels, we look for more senior people to evaluate them, right? Who have experience and have been around a while. That's just, I think, the way most divisions. That's my understanding. That's what I've heard from other divisions, and I know we typically go for more experienced people, just because of the nature of the program.
Yeah, I bring that up for a couple of reasons. One, having been on a review panel as a pre-tenure faculty member, that was very informative to see how folks interpret proposals from people. And so I would definitely recommend that if you can make the time as an early career faculty member to do that. I think it can be very rewarding. But you both have given very informative and helpful advice on the call, and so I would encourage you to be on a panel when you have the chance, because I think your feedback would be very helpful to other proposers. Jake, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the topic of the review panels, typically how many people are on them, and are they within your sub-discipline, or is it a wider audience of panelists?
Oh, it varies, but both those things vary widely. The number of people on the panel, it really depends on the number of proposals, right? It's typically proportional at some level to the number of proposals. I also know that we've been, because of the pandemic and everything being done online and stress on everybody, we've been assigning more. We have more reviewers for the same number of proposals, right? For on a panel, we'll have people doing fewer proposals per panel because less work, right? Divides the work up more. The same thing. Oh, I lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Oh, the second question was like, are they within your sub-discipline? Like, will they know what you're talking about, or can you not assume that? You have to like spell it out for them.
So I think you should assume that people are somewhat familiar with the general area, but not with the sub-discipline, because we're not going to be able to get reviewers for every, several reviewers for every individual sub-discipline, right? That's going to be very difficult, especially in something like my division, where we have multidisciplinary proposals, right? I'm going to see proposals in material that have relationships to materials and physics and chemistry and astronomy. I'm not going to be able to get enough reviewers, in each sub-discipline, but there will be common themes, right? So we always see there's computation, simulation, right? We'll see common themes, and so people can evaluate different parts. We'll have people who have expertise in different parts of the same proposal, right? That's the goal. That's actually sort of one of the jobs that the program officer has, is an actually we get to invite the reviewers, right? That's our job, is to get a good set of reviewers for the proposals within a panel. And we can also get additional reviews, right, if necessary.
Right. Okay, great, thanks.
Jake, I'll just add to that too. I've been super impressed with the coverage of the review panels that I've served on, and the different aspects of the different proposals that we were able to speak to. So like if in my field, if somebody was doing some type of like evacuation study, and there was an agent-based modeling effort, and there was this really big data science effort, and then there was this behavioral science experimentation work that was going on, there were different people that could speak to all three of those. And then on the career, I was always told to expect there to be someone with like educational expertise as well. I mean, more than just like, say, a professor, but somebody who does, for me, engineering education research or something like that, someone who could really speak to that component and knew that literature. Again, maybe not every single angle of it, but someone with that expertise on the panel too. So I've just been really impressed with the panels I've sat on.
Great, thanks.
I just had a comment too, based on, this is completely my opinion. I think, you know, even if there are people on the panel that are your like, they really know your topic in and out, I think it's best to write it a little bit more general, because ultimately people are going to be looking for intellectual merit. You know, that's the one thing that NSF really, really values, and then broader impacts is the other thing. And the best way I've heard intellectual merit posed to me is the way you should write it is, what you're proposing as the intellectual merit has to be useful to the community. So it has to be something that you can get a lot of people to care about. So it has to be more broadly appealing and understandable by a broader audience. Otherwise, you might find you might not get buy-in from the panel. And so again, completely my own opinion on this, but that really made sense to me. And given that I haven't been on a panel, it may not be good advice. So maybe other people can help me out here.
That was the advice I was given to be more general.
Right, you have to expect there are going to be people on the panel reviewing it that are not going to be experts directly in what you're proposing. That's just the way it is, right? Your research is your research, and it's unlikely somebody's doing exactly what you're doing, right? That would be very interesting. So you have to definitely be more general. That's going to help more people understand what you're trying to do and why it's important.
Okay, thanks everyone.
Great, thank you all. We're getting close to the end of our time here, so I wanted to just mention that we have a couple of sessions coming up. Next month will be focused on the NSF Smart and Resilient, or Smart and Connected Communities program. We call it Smart and Resilient here in our little world that we have, but we want to have a conversation with folks about that topic and ways that we might collaborate in the Midwest on that. And then in May, we're looking at a joint opportunity that NSF and NIH have around health and biomedical topics in the AI and data science realm. So if you are interested in either of those or have folks in your network who may be, feel free to join that session or circulate that to your communities. We're happy to have your input on this series. Any feedback about today's session or upcoming topics, we're happy to hear about any of that. Forms are in the chat and on our website as well. Any last questions, comments from anybody before we sign off today? All right, I want to thank Alan and Matthew and Elaina for taking the time today to speak with us. That was very helpful to hear all of your perspectives, and I'm sure that folks who were watching this in the future will be grateful to have those perspectives. So thank you very much. Good luck to all if you are proposing to this program. Remember to reach out to NSF as well. They're always happy to hear from you. So thanks again, everybody, for joining. Hope to see you on a future call.
Thank you, guys.